part 3 of our Women's Health series, and today we'll be focusing on cervical cancer. With this type of cancer being the 12th most common for females in the UK, we delve into the subject and discuss this topic on today's show. So for all this and more, stay tuned to Women's AM. Bismillah, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu, my dear sisters, and welcome to Women's AM on Wednesday morning. We're live from our London studios, here to bring you news, discussion, tips and much more. In today's show, we'll share with you some news stories that caught our eye in our first segment, News Bites, and in our second segment is the third instalment in our Women's Health series, where we'll be talking about cervical cancer. In our final segment for today, we'll be taking a look at how you can speak to children about a terminal illness. Well, very interesting show indeed. I'm your host Hassana, and today we have our regular sisters Zainab and Ayan. Assalamu alaikum, sisters.
Wa alaikum salam.
How are you both doing?
Yeah, alhamdulillah.
Alhamdulillah, great to see you, sisters. And of course, joining us later on is our special guest Adeola O'Layton, who is a gynecologist. So, sisters, alhamdulillah, you know, Easter holidays are upon us, and generally the museums are full of children who are kind of out there exploring with their parents. So my question today is, what's your favourite museum to visit and why? Sister Ayan.
Natural History Museum,
hands
down. You can find like bits of everything, and they've got like this new section built now, which is really, really cool, and they've got all this interactive stuff, and you get these cards as well that you can scan as you go along, and then it remembers everything that you visited, so that next time when you go back you can go to the bits that you've missed. So it's really, really cool. I have to say it's one of the best.
That's really interesting. You know, I often find with museums is that I don't know who has more fun. Is it the kids or is it the parents? You know, maybe a bit of both. I remember going on school trips and I used to definitely have more fun than the children I was escorting. Maybe shouldn't admit that, but there you go. Sister Zainab, how about you?
I grew up going to lots of different museums, so this is kind of impossible for me to answer, because I think maybe at the top of the list would be the Science Museum, but then the British Museum has, you know, the Islamic exhibition there. Even the V&A has, you know, elements of kind of Islamic history, but also the artistic nature of that museum I love as well. So yeah, I can't actually choose. Yeah.
It's really difficult. I remember we used to visit a lot of museums as well when I was younger, but I think the V&A is a really interesting one. I really enjoy visiting that one. I think they've got loads of really interesting and unique kind of exhibitions that you maybe don't find in other museums. But yeah, definitely museums are a great way to kind of go about having some holiday fun. So yeah, alhamdulillah, jazakallah khair for that, sisters. Well, let's go to our first segment of the show now. It's News Bites. In this segment, we'll be taking a look at the day's stories of interest and discuss what's been happening around the world. And of course, we'd love for you to join in our discussion on the stories that we're talking about. Call in live to the show. The number is on your screens, inshallah. So, alhamdulillah, we've got a great selection of stories here. Sister Zainab, talk us through your story, inshallah.
Yep, from The Independent, Global Drug Survey 2014, the UK has the most delusional drinkers. A very bizarre title, but the summary is essentially that the UK has the most delusional drinkers, as it said, drug takers and reckless use than in any other country in the world, according to the survey. Wow. It's kind of odd. But what's interesting about the UK is that we're amongst the most educated when it comes to the problems of drugs and alcohol, with 80% being aware of national guidelines and other bits of information. They were saying that alcohol is a drug that caused most people to be sent to A&E, and meanwhile the young Britons came top in terms of recklessness, saying that 1 in 3 admitted taking a mystery white powder last year. Essentially threefold, and there's a threefold increase in ecstasy users being admitted to A&E. So that you might have noticed in the news there's been a few more of these kind of cases where sadly some people have died from that. It's well known that the UK has a bit of an odd relationship when it comes to drugs and alcohol, not the healthiest in the world. And the one thing a lot of these problems seem to keep coming down to is this issue of education, that if we more, they will understand better and they will be more responsible, and that's it, in their you know, use of these things. But education works, but only up to a limit. So of course the drink driving campaign was very, very effective. So a lot of people more people are more responsible with how they drink and drive. But there's always this problem when it comes to essentially when you're seeking what's pleasurable, you're seeking kind of a good time, essentially, it will always overrides the outcomes in terms of the accountability that comes along with that. So in terms of
touching on that, because I think it's quite interesting that you're mentioning these things, and I know some of these campaigns were really hard-hitting. I remember being really affected by a couple of the adverts that I saw, and we often, as a community, particularly within the Muslim community, we might not think that we are affected by these kind of issues, but that you know, that's not really the case, is it?
Well, no, because you do get a lot of young people nowadays who don't necessarily hold Islam as part of their culture, so obviously they will kind of dabble in these sorts of things. But speaking of culture, I mean, one of the things that you notice is that within other European countries, they do have a culture of social drinking, but it's within a certain context. So you won't see people binge drinking or, you know, being drunk outside because it's culturally unacceptable. So I think culture is one of the biggest things. And I think as Muslims as well, we understand that our culture is an Islamic culture, and that's what hinders us from going and doing certain things. So I think one of the things here is perhaps the culture in Britain is different, despite, you know, all the education that surrounds these issues, is that culture is quite different.
I think, you know, coming back to the point you were making earlier about that whole idea of taking it to the extreme and that whole you know, the excess amount and just taking it to that next level. And you're absolutely right, that's something that does often happen.
Absolutely. This is the thing. When you're in that pursuit of a good time, then the issues of risk, the issue of accountability, how you affect yourself, your body, how you even affect other people, that kind of comes secondary. I'm not saying it doesn't appear at all, but it is something that comes later in the list of priorities, and this is kind of the issue. And so when you've got this problem of to what extent do we ban these substances and, you know, issues like that, it's always going to be an ongoing problem. And I just think the way Islam views it is really interesting in that it's completely banned, that anything that can fog the mind to the point of it completely taking over, then this is something that has to be, that is basically banned from us, because we just look, the way we look at it is that Allah knows us better, He created us. So you can see the goodness in that when, at the end of the day, different people respond to these kind of substances differently. Some people are more addicted to them than others. So it's impossible what you can do, apply one rule for one person and not for another. It's too complicated. And the way Islam deals with it, I think, is amazing. I
think you're absolutely right, and there is that beauty in the way that, you know, we're supposed to view our bodies as a trust. It's not ours, and we have to take care of it, and that comes into it. And it's not only about, you know, restraining from substance abuse and things like that. It's also about eating healthily and exercising and making sure that you're maintaining a good overall health. So, you know, Islam definitely has this kind of holistic approach to how we're supposed to look after ourselves. A really, really interesting article there. Jazakallah khair for sharing that with us. Sister Ayan, you've got one for us.
It's from the Telegraph. Why we really take selfies, the terrifying reasons explained.
It's that word again, selfies.
Yes,
tell us a little bit more about
this. I know. Okay, so this article is going into sort of the negative impact that selfies can have on people. It's quite interesting because people don't look at it beyond the fact that people are just taking fun pictures of themselves or, you know, of them with their friends or doing certain things. But this article goes on to explain that actually it does affect a person's self-image. They're looking at their friends, they're looking at the celebrities, looking at all these people and thinking, look at what they're doing, look at how they look, you know, how am I representing myself? Am I representing myself, or am I just invisible? Am I no one? So it's kind of propelling people to kind of adjust the way that they look, having this control over their own image. So they're projecting these images of themselves that are not necessarily realistic, just so that they can feel as though that they're also someone. So it's like a kind of a twofold thing. I mean, it's affecting people psychologically in terms of, I don't look good enough, I'm not doing interesting enough things, and I should be doing that. And also, you know, the issue of body image as well. You know, I want to look this way. What am I going to do? I'm going to have this app and that app, and, you know, shave this off and colour this bit and all of these things. And it's just, you know, it goes beyond the fun of just taking pictures of yourself with your friends and doing nice things. So I think it's an interesting one.
I think, you know, having worked with young people, particularly young girls, you know, often we talk about body image, but we don't realise that these kind of things, they actually have a really, really serious impact. And I was reading this article about how a young girl, she became obsessed with taking selfies to the point where she was taking up to 200 a day, and it was actually impeding on her real life. She would have to wake up at 4, 5 a.m. in order to be able to take the amount of selfies she wanted to before she found one she was happy with. So I think you're absolutely right. There's a number of different things going on here, and there is this culture of going out there taking selfies, but to the point where sometimes it can be almost like boasting about the kind of things that you're experiencing. Oh, I'm in a really remote part of the world, let me take a selfie here, rather than actually enjoying that moment. We're kind of too much focused on capturing the moment and sharing it with others without taking it in ourselves almost. Sister Zainab.
I think what's interesting about this story is it's looking at the effect of knowing too much about other people. I think that's quite an interesting view, and a view on the issue, and even in terms of how Islam views this kind of thing. So, we're kind of guarded against exposing too much of yourself. So whether it's your bad actions or, like, selfies seem to be body part centric and things like that. So obviously that's not something that we'd be able to do. And it's just interesting that I'm not saying that we're not allowed to tell people what we're doing, but it's kind of like it's a free for all. Definitely it's a free for all, and being subjected to that and being open to that repetitively has a negative effect. And how it's interesting how Islam says, you can't, the issues of backbiting and slander, backbiting being when you're saying something that the person does is true but they don't like, and slander being a lie that they don't, against that person, and how, that discussion of other people is even minimised to such a small degree, and even casting doubt upon yourself is something that you're not allowed to do.
I think it's interesting. You mentioned social media there. One of the things I've come across is that, there is this trend now with even sisters wearing hijab to take not only a picture of their full face, but to take pictures of part of their face, so either their lips or their eyes or their nose, and it becomes almost a little bit provocative to some extent. And I mean, I kind of find this to be quite a worrying trend, because it's kind of almost just focusing in on certain parts of the face, or as you mentioned, the body. I mean, that's definitely something else that's cropping up as well.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that we know that as Muslims, we have to purify our intentions for whatever we're doing. So even when it comes to things like selfies and just taking a picture of, a part of our face or all of our face, or doing certain poses, you have to go back and think, well, why am I doing it? Is this a rewardable action, or am I doing something that's, displeasing to Allah? And also, what am I going to gain out of this? Because at the end of the day, you're exposing yourself in a way that's not appropriate. So it all comes back down to, okay, it's an image of my face, but what am I really doing here? It's not just about taking a picture of myself, but what am I trying to achieve? What's the intention, and what kind of attention am I looking for from doing this as well? Because you find that a lot of young girls, unfortunately, because maybe they lack the Islamic understanding or they lack the self-confidence, you find that they're doing some really inappropriate things because they're looking for that attention and approval from others. So it's a sad predicament, I suppose, for young girls, because these images don't go away. They're in the net.
Oh, really, really interesting stories there. Jazakallah khair, sisters, for that. Well, alhamdulillah, really great start to the show. But here's a quick reminder of this week's competition.
This week on Women's AM, we are holding an exciting competition for you sisters out there. Up for grabs is a year's subscription for a sisters magazine. To be in with a chance to win this fabulous goodie, all you have to do is answer the following question. Which is the shortest surah in the Quran? A. Surah Al-Kawthar. B. Surah Tawbah. C. Surah Al-Fatiha. D. Surah Al-Nas. To enter, email your answer A, B, C or D to womensam@islamchannel.tv, along with your name and address and what you most like about Women's AM. The deadline for the entry is Friday the 18th of April 2014 at 4 p.m. All applicants need to be over 18 and residing in the UK. Please note, only one entry per person per household. A winner will be randomly selected from all correct entries, so get entering.
Really great competition there, so do get entering. We're off to a quick break now. Stay tuned. After the break, we'll be back with our main segment, Her Views, where we'll be discussing cervical cancer. Stay where you are, and we'll see you in just a few minutes. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu.